From religion to wrestling, gumbo to grits, politics to poetry, and all things Southern in between, this is Take on the South. Produced by the Institute for Southern Studies and hosted by the College of Arts and Sciences at the University of South Carolina, Take on the South examines the highs and lows of the American South, examines the truths and fictions of the country's most distinctive region, and picks the brains of some of its most accomplished students. To understand the South, you need to take it on, and that's what we'll be doing. Join us as we take on the South.
Hello, and welcome to Take on the South, the show that comes to you from the Institute for Southern Studies at the University of South Carolina. I'm your host today, Jennifer Gunter, and today we're going to talk with Christian J. Collier. This poet identifies as a Black Southern writer, arts organizer, and teaching artist who resides in Chattanooga, Tennessee. His works have appeared or are forthcoming in Hayden's Ferry Review, the Michigan Quarterly Review, Atlanta Review, Grist Journal, and elsewhere. A 2015 Loft Spoken Word Immersion Fellow, he is also the winner of the 2020 ProForma Contest and the 2019-2020 Seven Hills Review Poetry Contest. His most recent publication, The Gleaming of the Blade, was named the 2021 Frost Place Competition Editor's Selection. Christian, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
It's absolutely a pleasure. So first off, can you give us a little information about yourself? Where are you from? And what drew you to poetry in the beginning? So how did Christian become Christian?
Sure, my superhero origin tale. So I'm originally from Slidell, Louisiana. And I've been in Chattanooga, Tennessee for a very long time. How did I come to poetry? So, in the year of our Lord, 1998, I was in my freshman year of high school, and there was an older girl. She was a senior when I started there, and like most beautiful person I'd ever seen to that point, right? And I didn't have the confidence or as the kids call it, game to go and try to formally mac on her. So for whatever reason, I don't know, maybe this is one of those divine things. I thought I'm going to write poems for her. So I started writing poems. I started reading poems. I was reading Shakespeare's love sonnets and moved on to Yusuf Kamanyaka shortly thereafter. And at that time, late 90s, was really when the kind of like the second wave of contemporary spoken word was hitting. So, I'm a big music head, so I could hear if I got like I remember getting the first Lyricist Lounge compilation, and Saul Williams was on that, and I was like, wow, this is crazy. And I think Sarah Jones was actually on that compilation too, but you could hear Jessica Care Moore, I think like a year later on a Nas album, and Ursula Rucker was on the Roots records. So I was getting this dual poetic education early on, and so I wrote a lot of poems, and it dawned on me. I was like, well, it would look kind of crazy if I just were to go to this person whom I have no rapport with and just say, hey, here are all these poems about how I have this huge infatuation for you. So I never gave the poems to her. She knows nothing about her part in my artistic life, actually. I did not get the girl, but I got the craft and the practice.
So maybe that's something that'll come out at a future high school reunion when you win a big reward and you can thank her for being the muse so long ago.
Maybe. I mean, so here's the funny thing, and this is probably more indicative of social media and where we're at as a society. We actually follow each other on Instagram. Oh. She still has no idea about any of it. I'm just this random person who is a follower, a voyeur to her life, and vice versa. So I've thought about writing her to just say, hey, like, I'm not trying to mac on you anymore. This is, but if my life and the adventures in it have taught me anything, I know that there's a huge difference between what you say and the way that it's received. And I don't
Hmm.
want to have to be out in the street fighting somebody
Correct.
for
Yeah.
over somebody I'm no longer and haven't for over 20 years been trying to woo. So so
Hmm.
keep that one tucked into the vest. Got a good thing going right now.
Good. Okay. Thank you. Last year you were on the podcast Beyond the Spark, and the host asked you about the parameters of spoken word verses, and I don't know if verses is the right term, but spoken word versus poetry on a page. And I was intrigued by your answer that you don't really identify as a spoken word artist. And really, I immediately wrote down that sometimes it's just about brown kids who like poetry and might have a Nas CD, but it's a way that we put them in a box over here instead of as part of classic poetry. So can you just kind of expand on that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, and I have at several points in my life identified as a spoken word artist, but I've always also identified as a poet first and foremost, right? And I think the older I got, the more I just the older I got, the less sense it made to really break the two apart. Um, to kind of zoom out, um, spoken language is older than written language. So our storytellers and poets, do we look at them as spoken word artists? Like, so what are the parameters thereof? I think I've had the great pleasure of being able to read and recite my work in a great number of rooms across the country. So if you were to take a quote unquote spoken word poet, put them in a room with a comedian and a storyteller, where are the lines between where one ends and the other begins?
Mhm.
Because if if you come to see me read, especially a longer set, part of my banter, there'll be some jokes in there. You'll get some jokes. You might get some social commentary. You might get some stories. So I'm telling, so like I'm kind of blurring genre under the umbrella of a quote unquote spoken word poetry set. So it's something that looks murkier to me now, and I think that often it's become a way for people just to, just as you mentioned, um, look at brown kids who often recite their poems without paper
Hmm.
and do it in a relatively impassioned or engaged way.
Hmm.
I don't think that that's anything. So if we were to, if you were to look at Denez Smith, who's somebody who very much has been referred to as a spoken word artist, and listen to an Amiri Baraka poem. I mean, what really, where's the separation, right? Because Amiri Baraka often in his readings would give fiery poetry readings.
Hmm.
And so would Sonia Sanchez. I mean, I don't know. So it just seems to make less and less sense to me, and I just think that I think that if you, because I feel like if you get into the weeds of it at all, you will find poets who have really strong orality in their works. They've
Hmm.
always been there, always. Um, Recitation, there's always been somebody who's been reciting poems,
Hmm.
regardless of culture, the world over. So I think that it's a way to kind of try to put a new spin on something that is very, very old and ancient and has always been with us.
Mhm. Well, I was kind of immediately struck with the similarity to so I'm a historian, and I was I was immediately struck with the idea that uh, certain documents are valid as documents and others are not. So if something comes down through an oral tradition, it is not it is not considered as valid of a document as it, as if it were, written down on paper and somebody put it in a file folder somewhere. And so I was kind of it just kind of it struck me like that here's yet another way that we try to put certain histories and certain voices in a box and not let them be quote unquote classical, right? Or canonical, even. Um, by the way, I don't, do you do the New York Times crossword ever?
Oh, I do not.
So I'm just trying to keep my brain young. So I started doing it about a year ago. And Gil Scott Heron, uh, his poem Whitey on the Moon
Mhm.
was the answer in a New York Times crossword the other day. And I went back and read it, and it was so appropriate for today in
Nice.
that we've got these billionaires, right, who are trying to launch rockets and still, tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of people doing without. I don't know. It was just I was like, man, things don't change.
Absolutely, and I think that it's that poem has popped up um in two things relatively recently too, if I can remember, like Lovecraft Country.
Oh yeah.
It was on an episode of that, and there was another movie that actually this is really interesting. It hasn't hit me until just now. Um, Jonathan Majors is the connection between both of them. There's some movie that Jonathan Majors was in, and he's reciting um, the poem.
Really? That's
And
fascinating.
yeah, and but both of those have been within the past like at least a 5 years, probably maybe shorter than that. So
Wow.
there's relevance is relevant. So
Hmm. Well, and, I'm a big fan of Gil Scott Heron, and I would always just consider him a poet, even though I heard him perform them, on albums in the past. So, kind of to that point, um, you did a TEDx talk, which was really good, and it focused on the power of words, especially that poetry has the ability to change lives. And I really like that you were kind of polling the audience. You were, raise your hand if you believe that, words are powerful. And then you pushed them a little further. And then you kind of explained how poetry has changed your life. But you also discussed that it pulls folks um, into intimacy and vulnerability, which are two places that modern folks enter kind of only timidly, right? Like, vulnerability is not a place most modern Americans want to be. Um, and then you kind of went a little further with it when you were on a show called I'm a Writer But.
mhm.
And you said, and I'm just going to quote what you said and then ask you to kind of run with it, if you will.
Okay,
You said, I'm interested in writing things that challenge me and have a certain degree of resonance and force me to interrogate something, which I mean is just chasing us obsessions. That really is the scope the book fell under. I wanted to use race as a way of getting at a number of other things: intimacy, vulnerability.
sure. Yeah, I think that for me, I see my writing specifically with poetry as a way to open different doors,
Mhm.
and I want to see what's there, and I want to go deep into those rooms, and and uncover something that I maybe didn't know, or something that's like a hard thing to say, or just a very honest thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, with my chapbook, I wanted to provide an unflinching experience of um, a speaker um, in a southern setting, with all of the tension and um, lack of safety, and all of those different things, that the uneasiness, how things can be fine one moment and then they're very much not the next moment. Um, and Because that allowed me to pull in my own experiences,
Mm-hmm.
um, but also to get at things that are both historical and very much new and contemporary.
Mm-hmm.
So inherent is that is I can interrogate time. Obviously, I can interrogate region, and kind of zooming in, interrogate state and city as well. But always and all throughout that process, interrogating the self, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so that's a process that's fascinating to me. And if I'm allowing myself to be as honest as I can be, or that I want to be, or I don't want to be, I think that you're pulling whoever's on the other end of the poem that much closer. So you're inherently making an intimate experience. Um, and I like that because I like it for a number of reasons. There's a saying that everybody, even if you love poems to death, you're always looking for a reason to stop reading a poem. So the question becomes, how can I keep myself and other people engaged?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that intimate relationship, that if you're that invested in maybe the narrative of what is happening to the speaker, or in over the course of uh, these poems, or this sequence, that's one way that I can keep you engaged in the work.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're engaged in the work, then I think that you are maybe coming closer to a truth uh, of that speaker. And way back, because they always say that, like, the speaker and the writer are different entities. So way back in the back, you're coming a little bit closer to me too.
Mm-hmm.
My work, I have a full length that's coming out next year. And the scope is different. I think that it's much more of an intimate and personal project. And I think the same thing. I think it allows people to, if they choose to spend time with it, to inhabit a world that I've built, but also um, get a little bit closer to me as a writer, as an artist, and again, way in the back, me as a person.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. Um, so how do you think your work helps us to or contributes to our understanding of the US South?
I think, um, and so solely speaking about well, I shouldn't say that. Um, so I've started writing new poems that some of them are still in conversation with some of the poems from the chapbook,
Mhm.
and that's interesting. And I don't know exactly where that's going, and that's part of the fun. But I think that I think witness is very much a part of it. Again, that unflinching, uh, and I don't necessarily want to say glimpse, because hopefully you're spending. If I'm doing my job correctly, you're spending more time than just taking a glimpse, right?
Mhm.
Um, but that unflinching experience, that submersion into a particular world. Um, and I think that being honest, and I'm not trying to be overly pretty about the way that I'm writing about it, but I'm showing you kind of how this place, its people, um, view black people, black males, intimacy, the complexities of interracial longing and relationships. Um, because I don't think that I don't. I think that if I were to pull away or to pull the punches at all or anything like that, I'm not doing anybody a favor.
Mhm.
Um, I did a book club discussion a couple of weeks ago, and we kind of talked about some of that, and specifically one poem in the chat book that is about a a girl that I liked who also liked me, and she asked me to leave her birthday party because her parents were really racist. And
Mm.
somebody asked me if that actually happened, and I said, yeah, it did. It has no real bearing on the poem, but it actually did happen. And so we were talking a little bit more about it, and I was like, she got mad at me because I didn't come back to the party. Not understanding like the maybe there's danger in you coming back. You clearly aren't welcome by some of the people who are, and it totally didn't register to her,
Mm.
right? Um, so and that is fascinating to me because
Mm.
to me that's just like, oh, this is just obvious. And I think that without writing with a level of authenticity about those things, we don't see that schism between people.
Mm.
And I
Mhm.
think that now we've I feel like we've kind of hit a point where we take certain things for granted. Like we think that maybe common sense is just common universally, and now you can look at social media like, oh well, no, that's very much not the case.
Yeah.
But race is another one of those things that you see the way that, and this didn't happen like too terribly long ago. This was still very much in the 21st century when this thing happened, right? So this is a reminder that we aren't farther along than we would like to believe.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're seeing this very obvious backlash against the few progresses that were made in 2020. And I'm sure you're feeling them there in Tennessee. I know we are here in South Carolina. The legislative backlash that's just so obviously race related.
Sure.
Right? Um, so do you see yourself as using your art as a social justice tool in any way?
Well, yes, I do. I definitely do. And beyond even just the work that appears on the page. For a long time, I've also had the great fortune of running a number of art showcases and doing events and readings and kind of uh, doing the curator and programmer thing. And a large part of that for me has been creating opportunities for women, for queer artists, because I mean, where I am, I think that a number of us get overlooked whenever it comes to being on a bill or a poetry bill or anything else. So I want to use what I've been fortunate to achieve to open doors for other people, and
Mhm.
especially people who don't look like me. Partially because I'm just curious too. I mean, I want to hear more of these voices because I think that I don't know. I mean, I think like the arts are one of the things that show you more of the world, and not even just like, well, this is halfway around the globe. Like they're showing you different voices from where you lay your head.
Mhm.
And I think that that's such a beautiful thing because you're getting different perspectives, different experiences, um, different languages, or different utilizations of a particular language, and I think that that's such a fantastic thing. Um, so I want to create more opportunities for people to come into contact with that work and the practitioners of it. Um, and in my work, I mean, I think that especially when it comes to writing about race and having the conversations about it, I think that there are certain things that we all can agree on, but we have to look at them honestly.
Mhm.
I don't think that we look at a number of these things honestly, and I just again I don't think that helps anybody. So I'm interested in kind of moving the needle,
Yeah.
um, because I think that if we can all appreciate that some of these things are just flat out absurd,
Mhm.
then where do we go from there?
Yeah.
We hopefully we go somewhere. And if we agree that this is absurd over here, maybe we're not going in that direction. Maybe we need to go in this one, right? So that's what I hope to do. And but the arts have made my life better, and I want that same thing for other people too. And so I think being able to create space and to make um, honest work for it in my life, a lot of this work is mostly consumed by people who also do not look like me,
Mhm.
right? So and I think that that's another interesting thing too. Is it's making this kind of work that isn't making apologies for what it is, um, for people who you know don't have the often don't have the burden or the same burden
Mm.
as me as the person who's making it. What do you do with that platform, right? So I think
Mhm.
that's another part of it too.
Mhm.
Is just trying
You know,
to just make the most authentic, honest thing that I can, and letting the chips fall where they may, and then maybe we can have the dialogue about it if people feel something.
yeah, absolutely. You know, one of my favorite things about poetry is, yes, learning about all these other amazing cultures and peoples, but also recognizing myself in their words. That you can you can read a Irish poet, a Mexican poet, an African poet, and you're learning. I feel about your connections, right? That there's also heartache, and there's also joy, and there's also just part of that human condition um, that helps me feel a connection to the greater world, that I don't get in other ways. Right, kind of similar to music. Uh, yeah. So while I appreciate your work, that I get this glimpse into what life is like for Christian or for the speaker or whoever, I also feel like I've made a connection with another human being on a deeper level,
Hmm.
in a way that you don't get through fiction,
Hmm.
other kind of written genres.
Right.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Um, so speaking of that, what other kinds of art forms inspire you, like painters or filmmakers or other poets?
All of the above. I've said for probably the past 4 years that maybe my biggest inspiration beyond poetry has been the artist Mark Bradford.
Mm.
Mark is like I think like 6'8", You know, he was very thin, black, flamboyantly gay, amazing. And I'm very much like a big process person. Like you could bring I don't know, a guy who's gonna operate like a backhoe. He's gonna be like,
Hmm.
well, I just do this and that, and I'm like, wow, tell me everything, you know, because I'm so drawn to process and how people get from point A to point B. And I was watching a video. I'd encountered Mark's work before, but I'm watching a video and he's kind of explaining his process, and he's like, you know, because Mark likes to work big. He works on these huge scales, and he's talking about, you know, he'll put like a layer of something on, and then they'll build something over it, and then they'll break up the power tools, and he'll sand this off, or uh, he'll tear this off, and often he's like, you know, I sometimes I'm not sure what I want to say until I get to like the third layer or something, or you know, he's like, and I like to get in and just kind of get my hands dirty and be rough with the materials and what I'm doing. And it hit me. Like I feel like I've had two great epiphanies over the course of like the past 8 years. This is one of them. That if I were to apply this same logic and the same line of thinking and practice to text, what would that do? And
Mm.
as soon as I thought that, it was like, you know, all the doors open, and I got a bunch of different permissions. I no longer now see text as being like a sacred or a fixed thing. It's all malleable. It's all for me to use however I want. So I'll take a poem that I've written, a poem that's been published, and I'll get it. I'll rip this out of it. I'll take that line, I'll repurpose that, um, and it's allowed me to incorporate just different parts of myself into my practice. Like there'll just be a lot of play, a lot of experimentation.
Mhm.
You know, let's just look at let's just go for interesting text,
Mhm.
interesting lines, sentences, word combinations. Let's just go there. And after a while, I'll get enough of those things, and then I start moving them around, and then they start talking to each other in interesting ways, and then I can kind of go from there. But I don't actively think about, all right, this is going to be my poem about this. I
Right.
don't think about that anymore, and I don't even think about when I sit down and I'm writing. I don't even think about, well, I'm writing a poem. I'm working on a poem. I'm just moving words around, and I'm figuring it out,
Mhm.
because I don't want to also put that much pressure on, because I feel like once you name something, if you're like, it's kind of like if you're in a if you are having a casual situation with somebody,
Mhm.
and that is very much working for both of you. And the moment one of you is like, well, now we're in a relationship, now you've assigned a number of pressures and expectations. You've brought those things into it, and now the dynamic's a little bit, you know,
Mhm.
shaky. So I try to keep that out of it as long as I can.
Mhm.
Now, if I get deep enough into something where I know it's got legs and it's going in a particular direction and everything's like, okay, well, this has the makings of what can be a poem.
Mhm.
But yeah, I try to keep that I try to keep the process pure and wild as much as I can before I have to lasso it into a different thing altogether. But yeah, I mean, it's so Mark. All that came from Mark Bradford. That's been huge. Jazz music has been very instrumental in my life. A lot of times, not so much when I'm writing now, just because I'm older and I'm married and I don't have as much alone time. Um, but when I am often when I am trying to put a poem into a different container, or if I'm revising it, or if I like, for instance, with my actually with the chapbook, manuscript and the latest version of my full length, which might be the final arrangement. Period. We'll see. Um, I listen to jazz music for tone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I want to what this piece of music is doing. I want if I feel like this is if I were to take the tone of this body of work and put it to music, it would sound like this. Then I want everything in it to kind of be responding in some way to that sound. Um, that's been huge. The work of Mike Flanagan in film and TV. He's the guy who did The Haunting of Hill House.
Mm.
He's done Midnight Mass and the Midnight Club and all of these things. I watch everything he does because he does so many things that are applicable or can be applicable for the work that I make.
Mm-hmm.
If you watch The Haunting of Bly Manor, which I know some people are like, but if you were just to look at what he does, like specifically with repetition, it's like a master class of repetition in a body of work. Um, because it's never coming back to you exactly the same way. It's not every time it comes back, it's doing something else,
Mm-hmm.
right? So how can you apply that to your work, right? If this line is appearing, how is it complicating what's coming after, or how is it extending what's going on, and so they're all these different things just through this technique.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh man, it's so smart. So I try to study all that he does.
Mm-hmm.
Because it gives me another vehicle to kind of enter into to what I do, right? So, I,
I love you that you're so open to all these other art forms and letting them kind of direct you in your own. I think that's really cool.
sure. Well, I mean, I think that's the thing about inspiration. Period is it gives you different permission, and
Mm.
I think that it gives you a different. I think it allows you to step more into possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Like the moment that people hear what Hendrix did with stomp boxes and the guitar, they're like, oh wait, okay, so I can totally just I don't have to play this thing like an acoustic guitar anymore, right?
Right.
You have
Right.
all of that possibility and um, that you can kind of try out and see what fits and what might fit.
Mm-hmm. So, um, I want to know, and I've not asked this question in this before, but it just popped in my head. What is your take on the South? So the name of our podcast is Take on the South, but I want to know, what is Christian Collier's take on the South?
Ooh, okay. I got a lot of field to run through on this one. Um, well, my take on the South is that there are many Souths,
Mm-hmm.
just like there has always been more than one America, right? Same way about the South, and like for instance, where I live, if I go 20 minutes in this direction, I'm in downtown where you have younger people due to the university, and you'll have artists of one form or another because that's where the arts are kind of segregated to happen most of the time, and bar patrons and the homeless, and so all of that in one stretch of acreage. But if I were to go 20 minutes in the other direction, I can show you where you know clan meetings probably still happen, and
Mm-hmm.
and all of that is still within the city limits of one place.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been in a number of places where that's the case here. Um, I think that the South is a really fascinating place because it. I feel like the South very much is the story. Pretty much encapsulates the entirety of the American experience.
Mm-hmm.
That contrast of this is the ideal, this is the reality. Um, I think that the South is um, is a place of tremendous hardship, um, but also that hardship has birthed a great number of phenomenal things and people. And I think that if you were to look at, for instance, the story of Black people in the South, um, very much, I think that our story is the story of in spite of, right? Like,
Mhm.
um, and I think that um, that's a great thing to take with you when we go through hard times. I mean, I think that if you look at um, gospel music and the blues, which I feel like are different sides of the same thing,
Mhm.
because gospel music is very much like supernatural music. Um, I'm things are hard, but I know that this divine being has my back, right?
Mhm.
And if you were looking at, especially like older early blues, you get like, I was, plowing this field, and then like the devil jumped out, and then we started having, right. So it's the same kind of thing,
Mhm.
but even then with blues, you still have this thing of like, there's hope. Like, I hope the devil doesn't get me. I hope this doesn't break me. I hope. And our it so just in those two art forms, um, there's that story of struggle, and in spite of this, I'm going to hope that, or keep reaching for, and that thing is evident in every bit of art that Black Americans have produced. If you look at house music, um, very much that so many of like the songs are in spite of this. They like Beyonce's "Break My Soul" is probably like the biggest like house ish thing. And it's like, you won't break my soul, right? So it's like, even though there's this pressure and adversity, you're not going to get the best of it. And I think that very much has been the story of so many people in America, is if you want to find happiness, or any type of security, or whatever, any of those things, it's often in spite of, it's in spite of other people. That's the funniest thing about it is, for Americans, period, it's like, you've got to overcome us.
Mhm.
I think that's kind of a weird thing, but yeah, but that's also very much like in the South, you know.
Man, you're good. You are good. Um, so um, what's next on the horizon for you? Uh, and where can people find you?
Okay, I've got a my full length poetry collection coming from Four Way Books next year. It's called Greater Ghosts. You can be on the lookout for that. Aside from that, I'm beginning. I'm doing this totally the weird way, but it also kind of makes sense, because I have lived a weird and winding life, but I'm beginning grad school. So I took
Congratulations.
thanks. So I took like a 17-year break, and now I'm gonna be back in somebody's classroom and such. So I'm excited about that. The prospect of being a student again. I mean, I would argue that I never stopped being a student, but being a student and paying for it. How about that?
Yeah.
So I'm excited about that, and I run an arts initiative called the Plug Poetry Project. If you guys are interested in finding out more about that, you can just type that into Facebook or Google. And I'm interested in bringing more opportunities to the writers that choose to follow what we do.
Mhm.
We do pretty regular virtual open mics. Um, I put a lot of submission opportunities in because I want to see other people get their grounding with getting work out there into the world. There's also a docu series on YouTube that you can find that was made to showcase Chattanooga poets.
Hmm.
So a bunch of things happen with that, but I'm interested in doing more with that, just to kind of like I mentioned earlier, create other opportunities for other people to have some of the success that maybe I've had. I don't know. But aside from that, you can, if you want to stay up with what I have going on, you can go to my website, which is christianjcollier.com. It's got my link tree there, so that'll also take you to my Twitter and my Instagram. Those are the platforms in which I'm most active. But yeah, other than that, I'm around. And if you write me, I will. Most of the time, I'll write you back, depending on what the message is. But if people want to get signed copies of the chapbook and everything, you can get them from me directly.
That's really cool. So just so you know, Christian, I didn't start my undergrad until I was 31. And I just finished my PhD 5 years ago.
Nice.
Never too late.
Yeah.
Never too late. So I'm excited for you. You'll really enjoy it, I think. You're such an intellectual already that this is gonna just really expand your life, I think.
Oh, well, one, I don't often get called an intellectual, so I'm just like, oh.
Well, then you're hanging out with the wrong people. I'm just kidding. Well, we'd love to have you come visit sometime. I so appreciate you bearing with my schedule, which has been so much in flux in the past year, and just taking out the time again to speak with us.
Oh, you're totally fine. This was big fun, and I'm very appreciative that you've had me on.
That was our Take on the South. Let us know yours. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at U of SC South. Take on the South is produced by Matt Simmons of the Institute for Southern Studies. Special thanks to Professor Dave Garner of the University of South Carolina School of Music for composing our music. Tune in next time for another Take on the South.